We are now recording. Thank you for your patience. You may proceed, Mr. Chair, please.
Teresa, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll go through a roll call at this point in time. Teresa, can I just ask that the agenda be taken off the screen just so I can see everybody at first? Thank you very much. And I'll start with Jackie. If you can just please advise your presence verbally.
I'm here.
Thank you, Jackie. Adriana. I see you, Adriana. Thank you. Nicholas.
Present and accounted for.
Thank you, Nicholas. Pat.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Farr.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Councillor Wilson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Jackson.
Chair Collins, Ward 6 has joined you.
Terrific. Councillor Nan.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Any conflicts of interest today? Hearing none, we'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes from February the 23rd. I'll need a mover and a seconder on those. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Pat. All those in favor, raise hand, please. Thank you very much. And we need a motion on the audit and finance meeting minutes that were held on February the 16th. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you. 4A is a mortgage renewal for 7, 11, 15, 19, and 23 Gurnett Drive. And Rochelle, is this one? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just would like some feedback from you, please. I noticed on the agenda there is, and I was waiting for it when you said when you were going to, I thought, ask confirmation of the agenda. Oh, thank you very much. There's no place on the agenda for other business, and I do have a question that I would like to raise.
I do have new business on my roadmap here, so it's not showing on the agenda, but I'll definitely come to you under other business or new business if you'd like.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle on mortgage renewals.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mortgage renewal for 7, 11, 15, 19, and 23 Goodnight Drive. This is due maturing on June 1st, 2021, and it's a small amount of 73,209. There's 3.5 years left on this mortgage, and we should be paid off this mortgage at the end of this next renewal term.
Okay. Questions or comments on that? Teresa, if I could just ask you to take that down. Thank you. And Nicholas.
Are these single detached units under one title?
They are a row townhouse.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize for not saying that the first time. Why are we not just paying it off now and making the project available to borrow against if we need additional funding as we go forward into this intensive capital spending time?
Rochelle, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's this funding comes through the service manager. So basically the funding is received by CHH through the service manager, and it's in our portfolio management. It would need a ministry consent and all of that. So right now we wouldn't do that for this particular project. If the board does wish to go in that direction, then we would have to look at it collectively of all our mortgages, because this forms part of a portfolio and it's part of the Portuguese portfolio.
I don't know what that means, but I accept your answer, but I may come back to that later in the agenda. Thank you.
I can just add to that, Councillor Collins.
Sure, please do.
To the chair, it just means there are many buildings. So this is one piece of the building, but you have 680 Stone Church, 170. So those would be separate mortgages. So we have to look at it as a collective portfolio when we kind of want to pay off everything. So that's why we are just going with this strategy for now.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Rochelle. Any other questions on 4A before I move to a mover and a seconder? Don't see any hands. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Farr. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. 5A is a policy 11 single source provider for environmental consultant. Sean, I think you're taking this one.
Yeah, and I'll just throw this up here. Right, so through the chair, so this recommendation, this policy 11 request is for the continuation of work for Peter McCallum, or PML, for the environmental consulting at King William. This consulting has occurred in stages, and based on the findings of each stage, we've extended the work as needed. And for the final stage, we expect, well, we will exceed the 150,000 roster assignment limit for this remediation consulting. So we're pursuing approval here to continue using the same consultant through this critical final phase of consulting work. And just a note on the background. So the investigatory work has not uncovered anything unexpected in terms of environmental issues. However, the lands are polluted from previous uses and potentially from adjoining lands, those uses. So the soil conditions do need to be remediated, and that's where we're headed with this consulting work. So, and both the consulting work and the actual remediation of the site are expected to fall well within the budget for this project for those purposes. And then just in the discussion, yeah, the cost is to not exceed 95,000, which is in addition to the 150 already spent for this site and actually for Jamesville. They were done under the same contract. And the scope specifically here is for the scope of work for the consulting is developing the scope for the remediation that will be bid on, and it's providing oversight to that work, and then the reporting to the ministry and the appropriate filing. So those are all covered. And just one final note on this, because it is a straightforward one, but it does relate to the rapid housing funding, in that you've seen other policy 11 requests to achieve those timelines required to be eligible for rapid housing funding. And we were recently notified that this project actually wasn't successful in its application, although CMHC did say it was a high scoring project. And from what we understand, no projects in Hamilton received funding under the project stream of the rapid housing. So there is additional funding being pursued by CMHC to bring back to providers like ourselves that had high scoring projects for later this spring. So we're going to still move full steam ahead because we have secondary funding for this project identified, and to reduce our equity stake from the sale of single and semi-sold units, we would pursue that new rapid housing funding if it does become available. So just wanted to make that note as it relates to other policy 11s you've seen before. And I'll take this down from the screen here.
Thanks, Sean. Great presentation. Questions or comments, Councillor Farr?
Appreciate the update. I'll move the recommendation when it's appropriate, and I'm sure you'd be happy to second it. It's not disturbing news that's led us to this point. I know this isn't relevant, specific, I guess, to the motion, but since Sean mentioned it, you know, the CMHC not focusing on any projects, let alone this King William project in Hamilton, could be discouraging. But as you know, Mr. President, I'm a glass half full guy, and you heard Sean say that it's still a priority for us. And there's, as he said, secondary funding identified. So I'm looking forward to this project happening, and expeditiously. So I'll be happy to move this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll turn to you for that motion. And it's really good to see this one coming along. It's just in the last couple of months, it seems like, you know, a lot of things are falling together, and we're in a good position right now in terms of moving forward. Nicholas, questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's more of a general question. Since we've run into this, I think this is the third time we've been asked about policy 11. Now, I know the first time gave it general approval, but shouldn't we do something about the limit? Because it seems a tiny limit for the kind of situations we have in Hamilton. I don't know if it's a city policy or a CHH policy, but it might be worthwhile for a later date to come back with a 250 or 300 or something like that.
Sean, do you want to address that, or Rochelle or Tom?
Yeah, through the chair, I'll
See Tom with his hand there.
oh, sorry, yeah, through the chair, I'll respond to Nicholas. So we, on this element of procurement, we do follow the city policy. So as it relates to using consultants off of the roster, City Housing Hamilton, I have authorization up to 150,000. So that is one procurement policy where we are aligned with the city. So that's what we're working with, and I doubt it would get changed at any time in the future. So that it's just, I think, important that we follow that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before I turn to Councillor Farr for a motion? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Adriana. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. 5B is the National Housing Co-Investment Fund Repair and Renewal file, and I think that one is Samantha's. Yes,
so on March 11th, the City of Hamilton and City Housing Hamilton received confirmation from CMHC of a letter of intent for our 8-year repair and renewal portfolio under CMHC's National Co-Investment Fund. The portfolio consists of 194 million in projects over the 8 years and will impact over 6,290 units, addressing affordability, accessibility, and energy efficiency. CMHC has agreed to provide $145,688,880 in support. Approximately 58 million of this will be in forgivable loans and 87 million in repayable loans, of which City Housing can apply for 80,000 in annual utility savings, with the city looking at paying for the remaining portion. The remaining 48 million in the portfolio will be the responsibility of City Housing Hamilton, which will come from their capital allocation from the service manager. City Housing is asking for authorization to enter into the letter of intent with the city, and will report back on the terms and conditions of the loan agreement, including the terms and conditions of the loan and service guarantee with the city. This funding will help not only improve the conditions of our buildings, but also the quality of life for our tenants. If you have any questions, just let me know.
And very, outstanding news in terms of how close we are right now in terms of receiving the funds. And I guess the one question that I would have, if I could just hand the chair over to Councillor Farr real quick. Samantha, what is the start date on the funds? If they're provided, let's say in the next 3 or 4 months, there's an announcement and the funds then flow through to us. I know that through the city's budget process in both 2020 and 2021, accommodation was made for the commitments that are included in the report that speak to what CHH is required to fund, as well as the shareholder, that being the city. Is this a 2021 start date as it relates to the 8-year plan, or what's the first budget year as it relates to receiving the CMHC funds as well as the city funds?
I believe ideally at this time it is a 2021 start date, but I will ask Rochelle to confirm.
Sam, you're right. It's a 2021 start date for this project, going all the way up to 2028. And we do have some of our funds committed for 2029.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll take the chair back. Any other questions or comments on the report? Nicholas?
Yes, I have a question before we start. Like, if we agree to what you've recommended, do we get to see the deal before the deal is actually signed and committed to? Or are we being asked today basically to give you carte blanche and we'll get the money, but we don't know what the conditions are for using the money? We don't know what happens if we don't meet the conditions. We don't know what happens Like, who's securing the loan? Is it secured against CHH or is it secured against the city? Who, you know, like, these are kinds of questions I have. If it's just agreeing to a letter of intent that says we're going to make a deal on this, that's fine. If there are other things, I'd like to know all these things before I vote on that.
Tom or Smith?
Yes, yeah.
Over
Through the
Sean.
chair. Oh, sorry. Through the chair to Nicholas. So, Nicholas, this is the letter of intent. It is high level. You know, what you see in the letter of intent is, you know, is what the team has worked on, and there is all the details to execute the agreement. So certainly that information can be brought forward to the board prior to agreement for fulsome discussion. And you know, also there is the opportunity for us to share with you currently the portfolio that we've the work that we've outlined through the portfolio over that 8 years, so that we also have that in place. But those details can certainly and importantly provided to the board before the signing of the agreement. And just wanted to mention that in terms of approvals, the LOI is being approved by CityHousing Hamilton. Then it will go to council for approval, the LOI as well. That is a requirement of the to move forward on the execution of the agreement with CMHC. So that will be taking place with council in April. So this is part of that process.
Through the chair, I haven't seen the letter of intent. We were asked to send it back to you, so I'm not going on, but I believe there's some requirements we would have to meet looking at the program description through affordability, maintaining affordability. Like, I know in other work I'm involved in the city, CMHC is very particular about what they're giving you the money for. And sometimes they're also very slow to pay. So it's trying to understand the whole deal before we make this first major commitment.
Yeah.
So Tom, that information will come back at a later date is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I understand that our schedule of works, as a for instance, is we already have that prepared. So if Nicholas or others are interested to understand what type of work we're doing and in what locations, that is readily available at this time.
Yes, the chair. Yeah.
But just to a final comment, is the security against the corporation or against the city? Like, is it our responsibility as board members to look at this as the corporation's responsibility? I know the city has to indemnify it for CMHC to provide the money. That makes a big difference.
Bill?
Through the chair, CMHC has not yet come up with what they want, but we are approaching this now with a two-pronged approach: a city guarantee and also an encumbrance on our assets which are not yet encumbered. So we are looking at it as a two-pronged approach. So, like, basically I have to go through each property with a fine-tooth comb, make sure there's no mortgage or debt on it, and then decide, okay, what's the value based on impact? And we are doing the work right now for the terms and conditions sheet, but they're trying to see if they need to encumber, or it will just be a city guarantee, or it will be both.
And of course, as a board member, I prefer it be just a city guarantee. That gives us belts and braces as far as this goes. I guess I still have questions, but I'll await the other material before I go into it.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Any other comments or questions on the report? Councillor Jackson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Development Coordinator Blackley, for your report. Mr. Chairman, so just to recap, this is a federal program and federal funding that's come our way?
That's correct.
Well, listen, I often admonish senior levels of government when I feel they've abandoned or have not come to the fore for municipalities. But listen, kudos to our government MPs, Tassi and Bertina, and to the opposition MPs, I'm sure MP Duval and Green and Sweet, that were at least supportive of ensuring this $194 million came to our city and to CityHousing Hamilton. Can I just ask a very simplistic question? Would this have been an amount that we put forward that over 8 years, our 6,300 units with this amount of money that all be brought up to code and standard? Or is this an amount that CMHC, along with the federal government, decided we've got so much to distribute across the province and the country, and Hamilton's share will give you $194 million? Through you, Mr. Chairman, can somebody just explain or elaborate on that? CEO, please.
Yes, through the chair to the councillor. So the amount, to keep this simplistic, the amount from the federal government was essentially kind of divvied up. There was X amount for this work based on the number of our units. This is the amount that we could potentially obtain. So that's where we come up with the 195 million. I also want to add, though, to the point about kind of capital repairs, and I wanted to kind of make this just as one of my closing remarks. I don't want that our board or the council to forget that over a 20-year period, we have $400 million in work identified on our building condition assessments. So we certainly welcome this infusion of forgivable loan and loan to put together this kind of package for repair to our portfolio. But it is, it is a significant part of the way, but not all the way in terms of what we fully need over a 20-year period for our portfolio.
Well, thank
you.
It's a great start.
Sorry, CEO. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I was going to say, Councillor, the bulk of the funds here are coming from the city and CHH. So maybe Rochelle, you could give the breakdown in terms of who is providing what resources. Just a recap in terms of what's in the report. There is a forgivable loan, I think, which is kind of the cherry on top, but the bulk of the resources are coming from and through the city's capital budget process.
Through the chair. Yes, Councillor Collins. So CMHC will be providing 58 million approximately, which is forgivable loan. The balance, the 87 million, we are looking to council to approve yet to give us to pay off the debt. So basically, council will pay off the debt over the next. We have to yet land on how many years, whether it's going to be 25 or 35 years, but council will be providing that. Any energy savings that CHH has will be also towards that debt. And CHH's contribution of 48 million, that will come from our capital spending.
Okay, so thanks CEO and Chair and Treasurer D'Souza. Since math was never my strong point, I'm just trying to keep track of all the numbers. Supplementary to you, CEO Hunter, I appreciate the extra information. You said about 400 million package in total that we've earmarked for repairs. Do I take this 194, subtract that from the 400, and that leaves the city's contribution at around 205 million? Or could you further correct me and explain that, please?
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor. So sorry about that. No, the 400 million was just what was required across our whole portfolio. That was for information. And so it was just to kind of put in context around how much we were receiving versus what we need. So the 400 million is really just FY for your information.
I see.
What we're looking at is 195 million, of which Rochelle broke down roughly the, I'm just going to look at my note.
87, 58,
yes, and our contribution.
45.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Hunter. So, Mr. Chairman, overall, as you said, good news for our city for the housing portfolio, and I'm very supportive of this report. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor. Nicholas.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Mr. Chair, I'm not negative about this. Money is a fabulous thing to happen, particularly given the situation in Hamilton right now. I'm just looking at it with an overabundance of caution as a board member, just to pass that on. I think the staff have done a great job to date. And if we do get into this program, I think you're going to have to get more staff or more contractors, Tom. But thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Nicholas. Tom, go ahead.
Yes, through the chair, just a comment to Nicholas's, and then just one final comment. Yes, you're right. We are looking at around staff requirements, and that would come back to the board because certainly this is a kind of a quantum amount of work that would be required. And just in terms of the work for this kind of application, which we have been working on for probably 2 years, I would like just to recognize with the board the work that Bernice, Lily, and Rochelle D'Souza have undertaken. Bernice, a lot on the portfolio side, working out the work that needed to be done, and Rochelle on the financial side of this. Also, we had support from Jen Holhall, who's a senior project manager with Healthy and Safe Communities, and Jen helped to coordinate the work between us and the city and CMHC. She kept it moving forward, kept asking those questions, and kept driving them to get information back to us. And Samantha Blakely, also from our team, helping to get all this information together. And also Housing Services, Ed John and his team, and Brian and Kim are on this call as well at this meeting, all kind of collectively from both City Housing Hamilton and the city worked with CMHC to pull this together. So I just really had to recognize the work that those individuals have undertaken over almost a 2-year period to get to here.
Well, it's a great team effort. There's no doubt about that. Nicholas, do you mind moving this one for us today?
Certainly, I'll move it today.
Thank you very much. Pat, will you second this one? Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Next, are the repairs required to a single detached unit? And Leanne, I believe you're walking us through this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is in regards to a 40-year-old single detached unit in our portfolio. Due to hydrostatic pressure, this unit has structural issues. So namely, we have a failing main support beam, foundational cracks, and the windows are starting to crack due to the movement in the foundation of the unit. We have put up temporary bracing in this unit, but it will not remain structurally sound, and the unit does not have a remaining debenture, and so it could be sold. So initially we embarked upon that, looking at if we could sell the unit, what it would be worth. It was appraised at between $550,000 and $650,000 in its current condition. The catch with this is that it is an occupied unit, so the tenant living in the unit has been there for approximately 10 years. It's been a very successful tenancy, and so we offered to relocate this tenant to a comparable unit in a comparable neighborhood. Unfortunately, the tenant is resistant to this option, citing some significant concerns about the impact of relocating the family and how that would cause disruption for her family. So at this point, we considered 3 different options of what we could do with this unit. Option 1 is to repair the unit. That could be up to a cost of $170,000, including consulting and repair fees. This would involve relocating the tenant temporarily and offering them first right of refusal to return to the unit. Option 2 is the tenant, upon learning that we were considering selling the unit, obtained a pre-approval for a mortgage and a down payment and requested that we enter into an agreement to sell it directly to them in as-is condition. This would mean that the tenant would be responsible for the repairs on their own upon obtaining ownership of the unit. And option 3 was to relocate the tenant to the unit that we had set aside for them and list the unit publicly for sale as is. So our recommendation is to proceed with option 1. This is the least amount of disruption to the tenant. So we would spend up to $270,000 to remediate the issues in the unit, and the funds would come from the Poverty Reduction Fund.
Thanks, Leanne. And I know that there was some question leading into the meeting in terms of the address itself and some confidentiality. So I wasn't certain how we sorted that out between the time that we had agenda review and today. Tom, did you want to speak to why the address isn't here? And I don't know if there are specific questions about where it is. Is that something we go into camera about, or how are we treating that?
Through the chair. So I think if we just want to talk about the general area, that's fine. We felt that if the board wanted to specifically know the address, then we should go into camera.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll leave it at that at this point in time. Questions or comments? I know Councillor Jackson, you wanted to speak to this, and I have Councillor Wilson, Pat, and Councillor Farr. Oh, do we lose Councillor Jackson?
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You know what? I'm going to wait to see what the other board colleagues have to say. I am overall supportive. I I would make some general comments. So how about you keep me, I've reserved the right to speak later. I'll let other board colleagues ask some questions, make commentary, because I have a feeling I may have familiarity with this file. So keep me on your list for later, please. Thank you.
Will do. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I am not wanting particulars on the address, although I would like to understand some of the terms that were used. And what does comparable neighborhood mean? Could you unpack that for me, please, through you, Chair?
Through you, yep, through you, Mr. Chair. The neighborhood is close. I think that's what I intended to mean by that. The neighborhood is very close by to the one that they're living in, although it is not the same neighborhood. So it would involve the children of the unit having to relocate to a new school.
Okay, well, that was my very next question. What would it mean for the relocation of the children? And you're confirming that they would have to move schools, which is never a good thing. And are you able to comment on anything with respect to what it means if this individual is working outside the home for adding to her distance from work? And is it on a transit line? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This individual is not working outside of the home to the best of our knowledge. And both of the units are located on or close to a transit line.
Okay, so I'm going to show my ignorance here. If someone can help me out. This individual received pre-approval for a mortgage for this. When the approval is done, is there an assessment done on the house itself? Meaning, is it known knowledge that those repairs would add to her carrying her debt profile? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We don't know if she has disclosed the repairs needed to the unit to the person that she obtained the mortgage from. So we can't really speak to that, although we have fully disclosed the extent of the repairs to the tenant.
Mm-hmm. And one final question, this has been helpful. The corporation doesn't have a program in place that would enable this individual to permanently get off our list and into and grow some equity. If she has been approved for a mortgage on this, please. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have reached out to Housing Services to discuss that option. And I was wondering if, Kim, would you mind speaking to that?
Thanks. Thanks. Sorry. Through the chair. We also, as Leanne said, were involved at the time. We did have a home ownership, but at the time, the tenant did not have the pre-approvals. So we could certainly reach out and discuss that with them if that's something the tenant wants. So we have discussed that. And there may be home ownership available.
Thank you. If I could just get clarification on that, Kim, through you, Chair. I'm not sure I understood what you just said. You're saying that this individual could qualify for existing programs to assist in the transfer to a stream of equity? I'm sorry.
Yes, so in my discussions, I reached out to another team in Housing Services that administers the funds, but at the time there was no qualification to receive the funds due to pre-qualifications of a loan. So at the time when I spoke to the tenant, they were not pre-qualified. They did not have any verification on what type of mortgage they could get. So we could revisit that. If that makes it clearer.
So if I understood the preamble, though, that they have qualified now, though, through you, Chair.
through the chair to the councillor, we have received verbal kind of confirmation from the tenant that they have qualified for X amount, right? That's all we've received.
Okay.
And so we are very uncertain about when it was even disclosed to the lender about the extent of the damage in the unit, whether that would whether the mortgage would be allowed, and also the commitment to make the repairs, and depending on the extent of the repair. So as with discussing this kind of with the team with housing services, there just was we are just very uncertain about the ability of this individual to secure a mortgage of this size.
Thank you. And one final question, if I could, is it within our domain before a decision is made to seek those, to have that confirmation of whether those financial thresholds have been met and get confirmation from them? Because presumably, of course, what I've raised before and where I'm coming from is, should it not be one of our objectives to assist our tenants in building equity? Should it not be one of our objectives to decrease those who serve as tenants in order to decrease our numbers? So that's where I'm just trying to understand, what are the parameters of our ability to confirm this financial might of the tenant? Thanks. Those are my questions.
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor, I can defer to other members of the team. This is the first time I've kind of been in this situation to kind of to this extent with these extremes. So in the past, when we came to the board about a separate sale to a developer, which related to access, right, to another property. It was real estate, right? The deal was brokered through real estate with the individual. So we have worked kind of through the real estate division of the city to confirm that. But to this point in time, we have never, and even with the sale of the singles and semis, it's all been through the real estate and the legal. So we have never kind of specifically approached everyone about the confirmation of what they would have. So I don't know, Kim or Brian, whether you have any comment from Housing Services. It's just, I don't today have an answer to that.
I guess I'm not able to, it'd be hard for me to make a decision in the absence of that, but thank you. Sorry, Brian.
Sure. So through the chair, as part of our regular as part of our offering of down payment assistance, we would be collecting all of that information as part of that program. As Thomas said, in terms of the sale, CHH would have to satisfy itself in terms of the information that it needs as part of the sale, which they would have to do in consultation with legal real estate. The other thing I just wanted to offer is that what we do not offer the down payment assistance program consistently right now, because what we found is that the price of homes has gone so high that it's actually very hard to get low, even to mid-income households to qualify, because the incomes that are required are so high. So this is where this is a persistent challenge right now in terms of offering down payment assistance or offering home ownership opportunities to households living with lower incomes.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll wait to hear what my other board members' questions are. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Pat, you're next.
Yes, I'm wondering, if we do sell this property to this tenant, could the conditions of sale identify the problems with that soil, even if we put in this $180,000 or $170,000 worth of repairs? I don't see that problems. And I think that if that condition of sale is written in the agreement, that this tenant cannot come back and say, well, I wasn't aware that this was an ongoing problem. And so that's my question.
Pat, you cut out a little bit, but I think Tom, you got the gist
I
of.
think so. Yeah. Through the chair to Pat, I certainly would want to get legal counsel on that option. Once again, kind of in discussing this is, first of all, the cost. We're not 100%. You know, we had a consultant come in to look at it and gave us this range of options, right? So there would have to be, we would have to even hire an engineer to determine what was the extent of the damage and the cost of that. And then subsequently, I would certainly, you know, I would be speaking to legal about, could we in fact entertain in an offer that there was a guarantee that these improvements would be made to the home.
Okay, thanks, Pat. I'll just ask Councillor Farr to take the chair, and Leanne, can I ask then through the vice chair? The tenant is agreeable to staying if it's repaired. Was that the first option that the tenant was seeking as it relates to wanting to stay in the home? I'm assuming this whole issue of option to purchase may have come about when we were contemplating getting rid of the unit because of the amount of repairs that are required on the property. So could you walk us through how the discussion transpired with the constituent and how we ended up with the many options that we have on our plate today?
Yes, your assumption's correct. We initially were talking about relocating the tenant, and there, just because we were considering selling the unit because of the cost of repairs. The tenant does not want to relocate at any cost. I think they really want to stay in the unit, whatever that entails. So that's why they embarked upon getting pre-approval for the mortgage, and from what I understand, having to borrow from family members for a down payment. So they're really scraping together their resources to try and stay in this unit.
But they are agreeable then if the option is to temporarily relocate, CHH fixes the unit, makes it safe. They're agreeable then to coming back as a rental unit, so to speak. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So they would support the recommendation that you've put in front of us here today?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take the chair back. And Jackie, you're next on the list.
I have a concern. You said a main beam. Is that a safety issue, keeping these people in the house? And how long should we keep them there? Even if we do decide to do the repairs, they're going to have to vacate. Personally, I think the option 2 is to let them buy it with all the restrictions that we might have to put in the offer. If they can come up with the money, I truly believe that it's a way to the future. They're going to need money down the road, and equity in a house is one way to do it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the main beam is a significant structural issue, and it is a safety issue. We have been having a contractor attend the unit along with a structural engineer on a weekly basis. Each time we've had the contractor go on basically a 2-week period, the supports are moving. So they're becoming loose. So there's indication that there's continued movement in the unit. We really have pushed to relocate the tenant sooner than later, but we are meeting with a lot of resistance because of the stress that this is putting on the family. So yes, we are very concerned about leaving the family there. And that's why we're bringing this here today.
Jackie, any other questions or comments?
To say they have to move out anyway, regardless, to fix it,
Correct.
to
right.
buy it, anything, unless they buy it. And so I think it behooves us to say, we have to move you for your safety, and then figure out if they're going to buy it and they're going to fix it up before they move in. I can't see any mortgage company letting that go. They come and do the assessments, all the ones I've ever bought. So yeah, I think we got to get them out first, as quickly as possible, just for their safety.
Thanks, Jackie. Oh, sorry, Leanne, go ahead, and then I have to go to Councillor Farr, who's next on my list.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have expressed our concerns repeatedly to the tenant about the safety issues in the unit. One of the challenges that we're presented with is that they are refusing flat out to move. So we are looking at potentially having to take legal action to have them removed from the unit for their safety. They're unfortunately not cooperating with the recommendation to move.
Thank you, Leanne. Councillor Farr, I apologize. You were on my list after Pat and I skipped over you. You have the floor now.
No, it's a good conversation. Complicated too. I'll just through you, Chair, where Leanne left off. Using words like potential safety issue, and I think you probably have an opportunity here today with the board. We could make that decision for you to just reinforce this. If you can just give me a sense that it's not potential, it's a very real safety issue. You're talking about getting lawyers involved to remove unwilling tenants out of an unsafe place. So are we 100% sure that this hydrostatic pressure issue is a safety concern to our tenants living in this semi-detached or single detached?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. Our structural engineer that we have had assess the unit has indicated this is a safety issue, not a potential safety issue. I apologize, wrong words.
No problem. And whether it's any one or a machination of the options before us, would it be helpful to amend the motion to offer direction from the board to actually, whether they're buying or to Jackie's point, or relocating temporarily if we choose to fix, that we actually provide board direction to immediately address the safety issue of our tenant? Would that be helpful to you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it would, because when we proceed to the Landlord-Tenant Board to give us an order for that, it would be very helpful to say that our board has supported this direction.
Well, now that it's out there, Mr. Chair, I think we have an obligation. I mean, we've heard enough, and I think that's our first priority in this debate. While there may be some other questions that are unanswered, initially when I looked at this last night, I thought, what a good example of why, you know, a couple of terms ago, our president Chad started talking about and initiated as a board the divestiture of these single detached. 180K is what the report says, although I heard Leanne mentioned 270K and I didn't see that in the report. But either way, it's a sizable repair job for one single detached building that our corporation owns. And that was my focus. But now that these questions have been asked and the debate has occurred, and I'm sure it sounds, there's a couple of interesting comments from Councillor Jackson, who may have an idea of what we're talking about specific address here. I understand that we're intentionally omitting the address for privacy reasons. But when I also hear Tom sort of say to us without saying that he questions the ability for this tenant to be able to secure a mortgage, $600,000. I did a quick Google of CIBC. You need to put, I think, 60,000 K just as a down payment to get a 5-year. And the average annual income is above 100 and something K. Anyway, it's a tough nut, let alone for residents of our city housing units. The other thing I thought about was last night before this debate was it's a really good example of how compassionate we are as a corporation, because the option that is before us is to actually understand and appreciate a 10-year tenancy for a family in a single detached that really is quite clearly from the conversation today and in the report adamant about wanting to stay in place. And so that's very much appreciated too. But I'm going to leave it at that. I just feel now that the hyper focus or the spotlight, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, should be on the tenancy safety, and then we'll figure it out how the dominoes fall from there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I have Nicholas. I think you raised your hand, Nicholas. You're a first-time speaker on this issue, and then Pat, I'll have you for a second time. Nicholas, and then Councillor Jackson.
Yes, I was going to make many of the same comments that Councillor Farr made about our responsibility and our liability as owners of this property. And God forbid anything should happen to the family living there. But it leaves us looking bad when we're really trying to look good and be generous to the family. The sound of it from an engineering point of view, having had engineers work for me, we would not have hesitated to move them immediately. It's not good. And even with the reluctance, we have to take whatever action, regardless of the outcome of this discussion, we have to move them. And I would certainly be happy to vote for anything that gives you that authority.
Thank you. We'll definitely include that in the motion as was suggested by Councillor Farr. Councillor Jackson, I passed on you originally. You passed on your opportunity to speak. So do you want me to go to Pat first and then I'll come back to you? You're frozen on my screen. Pat, you want to jump in on this one? And
what
then I'll go to Councillor Jackson.
Yes, excuse me. What I would like to know is if they're in their refusal, say, God forbid today, the house collapses, what liability are we responsible for? Or are we responsible for anything? Or is there something that's been issued to them that they must leave? And if they haven't, and like if they're injured or God forbid killed in this in a collapse, are we liable for this? That's all.
Through the chair. At this point in time, if something did happen, we would be liable. We own the unit. It's the tenancy is with us, and also I just want to affirm that we have been following this very closely, with the engineer and the consultant. And if they were saying that it is kind of an imminent, yes, then we would move, as we have around any other emergency, right, that we've had in the city fire when we've had to move people directly. So we're doing our best to support the tenant within expert and professional advice around the current structure and its safety, but understanding, as the board is seeing, that there is the need to move as quickly as we can to make them safe.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson, and then I'll go to Jackie.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can I just, before I offer just a couple of quick comments, can I humbly suggest, CEO, an item like this in the future, could it have started in camera given potential real estate matters, legal matters, liability? I just feel that we could have had a true fulsome discussion, all legitimately being in camera, for a lot of the comments I'm hearing. So just maybe take that under advisement, please, CEO, for the next time. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I have familiarity with this file. I want to commend frontline staff. They've been in close contact with the family. And I want to really thank Acting Operations Manager Leanne Ward. Councillor Farr touched on it in his closing comment. This is a very thoughtful, compassionate, sensitive, preferred option that ultimately upper management has brought forward, which I am supportive of. The family, for all the right reasons, community, establishment, school, right near public transit, near shopping, 10 minutes away from library and rec center and parks. So, and about a 10-year establishment of their residency with friends and neighbors. And so I want to support that. It's finally reached this point to take action. And so I do support the preferred option that Leanne Ward has brought forward. And if the board wants to put that caveat that to embolden the operations manager, that the family, we need to move them as soon as possible for everyone's safety, but get on with the preferred option, which I board will support, which I'm happy to move with that caveat, with that amendment. I think it really, as board member Butt even said, it speaks volumes to how our staff handle individual sensitive matters such as this, especially when it comes to the livelihood of our tenants, our constituents, families that we care about in our portfolio. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Jackson. And any other speakers on this one before I go back to Councillor Farr to amend the motion to provide the direction as it relates to giving staff the ability and direction to vacate using the necessary tools. Councillor Farr, you want to address that issue that you raised earlier?
Yeah, we'll just, we could use that wording and just preface it with respect to our tenants' safety, which is of paramount consideration. And then your sentence there, Mr. President, and I'm sure it wouldn't be hard. Oh, I think Nicholas wants to second it. No?
No.
The amendment.
Going to do it.
Yes, he said yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, on the amendment.
I should let Jackie move it and Nicholas second it, since Jackie kind of came up with this first. So, Jackie, you want to move it instead of me?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
That's what I was going to say a few minutes ago. I'll move it.
Super. Moved by Jackie, seconded by Nicholas. All those in favor of the amendment? Thank you very much. Now on the main motion as amended, Nicholas, did you want to speak to it again? Nope. Okay. So all those in favor of the main motion as amended?
Well, could I move it for the record? The motion
Yes,
as
please.
amended. Leanne's report, please, as amended, please.
Yep.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Jackson and Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. I believe we're on now to new business. Tom, I didn't see any CEO comments on today's agenda, so you don't have any? Okay. So new business, Councillor Wilson, you wanted to address an item under new business. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to preface my my question and comments by saying I have been in communication with staff, getting some information, and they've been very forthcoming and helpful. And I wanted to raise the issue of Marilyn Mitten, who was a resident of 200 Jackson Street West in Hamilton, which is a CHH building, as you know. And her body was discovered in July of 2016 inside of her apartment. And I came across, as we all did, I think, this information from some details that were put out in the local newspaper, the Hamilton Spectator, I believe this past March, detailing many of the circumstances surrounding her life and her death, by court proceedings and interviews with some of the people who were close to Ms. Mitten. And the newspaper described a situation where she was subjected to a protracted period of harassment and intimidation by the man who was found guilty of her death. And because she was a tenant, and because the harassment and the intimidation, as at least from what I read in the newspaper, took place within her CHH building, and also extended to physical alterations of her unit, it caused me to consider what is my responsibility as a board member in light of what I would describe is an epidemic of violence against women across and throughout the world. So I am in receipt of some information, as I mentioned, from staff, and it's been very helpful, but I do have some questions on trying to understand the file to the best of my ability and according to the information that we are legally allowed to have access to. And I would like to know if, I'd like to suggest that if we could put this matter on a future agenda so we can better understand our existing, at least I can better understand our existing policies and procedures as they pertain to tenant safety and security, and the role and the responsibility of this board and staff in this regard, and what changes have been made since this very regrettable incident, and if there's anything further that needs to be done in our efforts, continuous efforts, to ensure the safety and security of all tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, you can put this on a future agenda for discussion. Oh, sorry. Yep, you're there. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other new business
Yes.
at this point in time? Councillor Nan?
Sorry, not new business, but I do want to thank Councillor Wilson for raising this point. Not lost on me that it's still March and it is International Women's Month, and discussions around gender-based violence, sexual violence, and hate-based violence experienced by women, non-binary, and trans people is on the escalation in this pandemic. And I think there is no better time. We should always have time to review our policies to strengthen them to ensure safety and security for our residents. That said, it does also dovetail to other previous work that as a board we've had some discussion around as it relates to hate-based incidences in CHH buildings as well. And I would appreciate if the report or future agenda item and future discussion could review our safety and security policies and procedures as it relates to the entire umbrella of issues, and proceed that way. I think there might be some opportunities for improving those policies and procedures, and I'd like to be able to spend some time as a board member to research some of those in order to be prepared for the discussion when we do bring it forward as an entire board to review. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business at this point in time? Seeing none, I need a motion then to adjourn. Moved by Adriana, seconded by Jackie. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.